Hey there, Julia Gentry here, and today we're going to be talking about fear. All the things that we're afraid of. Why? Because everybody has something that they're afraid of, including you. You know, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not measuring up, fear of success. We're afraid of the economy, we're afraid of next year, we're afraid of what happens if we make the wrong choice, all of those things. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about fear because it's part of human nature, right? We're talking about fear because, in my mind, we're starting to accommodate for the things that we fear, right? Like, as a coach, I talk to people all the time, what are you most afraid of? And people say things like, it's just, I'm just afraid that I'm going to fail at this. And everyone's like, yeah, I totally hear you. I'm afraid that I'm not going to have enough money. Yeah, me too. I'm afraid that next year is going to be a horrible year. I know, me too. And we're like creating some sort of narrative that like makes our fears practical. You know what I'm saying? Like our fears all of a sudden are the responsible way of living, and we really should consider our fears, right? But all of us do different things with our fears. We are accommodating for it. We try to avoid it. We try to pretend like it doesn't happen. We even just focus on it more because maybe if I focus on it more, it will go away or it will justify that I'm right. Like, see, I told you I'll fail. See, I told you you're going to reject me. See, I told you the economy sucks. See, right, a lot of times even our fears, we look at them and focus them because then we can be right. And we all know, right, like the acronym of fear, false evidence appearing real. We've all heard that before. And if you've ever been afraid of any of those things that I've mentioned, you're like, where are you going with this, Julia? That is real. Like, that is real. Like, the fear of rejection is real. The fear of failure is real. Like, so even the acronym and where you might be going with this video, like, what are we doing here? But here's what I want to do today is that I want to actually look at fear from a different perspective and then try to just like, instead of accommodating for it, instead of just dealing with it, instead of just like trying to rid the fear and pretend like it doesn't exist, I actually want us to come at this from a different angle, because what I would like to suggest is that fear is a byproduct, not a starting point. Did you hear what I said? I said that fear is a byproduct. It's not a starting point. That'll revolutionize your world. And it is such a powerful thing that even the Bible says, fear not, like 365 times. I believe that God was probably recognizing that that should be good to give them a fear not reference every single day of the year. And just repeat it again, right? But for the sake of the exercise, I want you to consider the thing that you're most afraid of right now. Big things, little things, anything between. Maybe you're the one that goes, I'm afraid of failure. I'm completely afraid of rejection. Or this economic crisis, kind of afraid of that. I'm afraid of the market. I'm afraid of what my business is going to do. What are you afraid of? Write it down. Push pause. I'd play elevator music, but I don't have any right now. So do that. Now, I want you to consider that what you're fearing is only hypothetical. Like, it's kind of theoretical. True. You know what I mean? Like, I'm afraid to build this business because it might fail. Keyword, might fail. I'm afraid of what is coming in 2023 because it won't look like last year. Maybe. I'm afraid that if I actually pursue this relationship, that I'll get what I want. Maybe. Possibly. I'm afraid that they're going to reject me. They might reject you. It is possible that that could happen. Well, but yeah, I have a lot of historical data and empirical evidence that proves it to be true, but it's not true. It's not true. So what we have to realize is that we're actually creating a narrative that's like trying to reinforce a fear that isn't true. It's hypothetical. It's theoretical. So here's what I'd like you to consider, that fear, therefore the fear of failure, is the byproduct of your focus. Whatever you're focused on is what's expanding as a potential byproduct of the result. What does this mean? It means that I need to stop worrying about what I'm fearing about, and I need to be paying more attention to what I'm focusing on. You guys, this changes the game. If I keep trying to just get rid of the fear of failure, what am I looking at? The fear of failure. If I am just afraid of economic crisis, what am I looking at? Economic crisis. If I am afraid of rejection, what am I looking at? Rejection. Here's what I would like to suggest. What are you looking at? Wait, but Julia, I'm afraid. I didn't ask you what you are afraid of now. What I'm asking you is what you're looking at, because what you're looking at is actually connected to the fear, and the fear is what's driving this habitual pattern to look at it more. And so in theory, if we back this thing up, it's not what you're afraid of that matters. It's what you're putting your focus on that matters. Focus on it, then watch what happens, which means that fear, therefore, is not a result. It's a starting point. It's a result. It's not a starting point. What's our starting point? Focus. Say that again. Fear is a byproduct. What's my starting point? Focus. Why is this important? Because the same is true with faith. I know we're going to talk about faith today. You're like, you did that to me. I did. The reason I didn't call this faith, because you wouldn't watch it. I called this fear because everybody is afraid. And they're like, tell me how not to be afraid. So I did that because if I labeled this, have more faith, nobody would watch it. So welcome. So same is true with faith though, right? What does the Bible say? It says that faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the conviction, the belief of things not seen. Hypothetical. In theory. The only difference in faith and fear, which is a gigantic difference, is that faith is birthed in promises and revelation. Fear is birthed in defeat and death. So when we look at them at a practical level, what it means is that they're in theory, it's just the difference on where I'm putting my focus. So they both work the same way. Whatever I put my focus on is what's going to draw up faith or fear. So my faith and my fear is a byproduct of my focus. What that tells us is that at a baseline, they're the same thing. Only one is rooted in truth and one is rooted in death. You see where we're going here with this? So really, in theory, fear, what I'd like to propose, fear is just misguided faith based upon incorrect focus. You should write that down and then marinate on it for the next, 17 days. Faith is God's original design. He had a plan, he saw it, then he spoke it, then he walked that thing out. Same thing if you look at any chapter in the Bible, any Bible character that we love and aspire to be, they had a dream, they had revelation, they had the promise, and then they continue to put their focus on the promise, and their faith was a byproduct of where their focus was. So often, right, Abraham and Moses and David, all of these men were credited for incredible faith in God, and we try to increase our faith, but what we're doing is we're putting our focus on the things around us, so our faith is waning, and then we're judging ourselves because we don't have enough faith. And what I'm here to tell you today is stop trying to have more faith and just put your focus back on where it needs to be. Your faith is a byproduct of your focus, meaning put your attention on what God told you. Put your attention on what God says in his word. Put your attention on your dream that he gave you 10 years ago. Yeah, but that was 10 years ago. So did Moses. Moses was given a dream. 10 years later, still didn't have it, still was old, decides to take matters in his own hands, right? Gives his maidservant, right? Then he takes his maidservant, goes, oh, if God's not going to answer this prayer, I'll do it on my own, right? Births a child that way, only to realize this is not what God intended. God's original design was for him to move in faith based upon that he would give him a son and he would father many nations. Abraham took his eyes off of the promise and of course started to fear that it would never happen. Why? Because he put his focus on his age. How many of us put our focus on our age, on our weight, on our bank account, on the government, on the things around us? And then we wonder why we're fearing. Stop trying to rid the fear and start to recalibrate your focus on where it needs to be. Your focus needs to be on the promise, the revelation, the divine thing that God asked you to do, that granted you that revelation, that he said, this is possible. Whatever that is for you, he's told you. I believe today I'm here to awaken that thing and to say, stop actually focusing on what's around you and put that focus back on the revelation that he's given you, and let that continual focus drive your faith through the roof. Here's the example. It's like Peter. He's in a boat. There's a storm. Jesus is walking on water. He says, Peter, get out of the boat, walk to me. What does Peter do? Gets out of the boat. Half of this journey is us getting out of the boat and walking. Get out of the boat. Most of us aren't getting out of the boat. Get out of the boat. I'm afraid. I know that. Remember, put your focus on Jesus. I know, but there's waves. I didn't say that there wasn't going to be waves. Jesus didn't tell Peter there's not going to be waves. Get out of the boat. Then put your eyes on Jesus. What happens to Peter when he takes his eyes off of Jesus? He puts his eyes on the water. What is the water doing? There's a storm. Anyone would freak out. First of all, the fact that I'm walking on water is mind-boggling enough. Sharks, all things. He puts his focus on the wrong thing. Were the waves always going to be there? Yes. Is Jesus still there? Yes. Where is he putting his focus? On the fear. He's putting his focus on the waves, which is developing the fear. Then the fear affirms his focus, and the focus affirms his fear, and now he sinks. Oh my gosh. So what I'm saying today is, where are you putting your focus? What if you put your focus on the thing, the promise, that it is the evidence of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen? Stop trying to just increase in faith and fear, and let it be a byproduct of your focus. The reality, not the darkness, right? That realizing that fear is the counterfeit of faith because of an unaware focus. So if you're walking in fear today, I want you to check your focus. If you're walking in faith today, I want you to check your focus. If you're walking in fear today, it's a byproduct. Ooh, what am I paying attention to? That's what that would sound like. Ooh, fear just triggered me. Ooh, that's possible. Ooh, I might get rejected. Ooh, I might fail. Ooh, this might not work out. Okay, super, got it. Pay attention. And then, where am I going to put my focus? Because that focus will cause me to make decisions based upon what God said, not what the world is telling me. And I'm going to make decisions based upon where I'm going and not where I've always been, right? This is credited to us as righteousness, right? If we read in Romans 4, there's a lot to read here. But what it says is that promise of faith versus keeping the law, right? What does this mean? That God is actually after our heart and where we're putting our focus, and that when we focus in on the things that he's asked us to do, that our faith will arise, and then our faith will be the thing that continues. Why? Because now my faith and my focus will be working together. It says that God promised Abraham and his descendants that they would have an heir who would reign over the world. That's the promise. This royal promise was not fulfilled because Abraham kept all the law. This royal promise was not fulfilled because Abraham kept the law. Let me say it that way. But because Abraham, through righteousness, is transferred through his faith. What does that mean? It means that through the things he put his attention on, through his righteousness of focusing on the promise, not all the things he could do, that it was transferred to him through faith, right? Because then he started moving in faith, and so faith was a byproduct. For if we keep the law, it earns the inheritance, and faith is robbed of its power, and the promise becomes useless. For the law provokes punishment, and where no law exists, there cannot be violation of law. The promise depends on faith so that it can be experienced as a great grace gift, and now it extends to all of us. All of us. Here, if we skip on to verse 17, I'm reading Romans 4. I don't know if I mentioned that. Romans 4:17. Here's our example. For in God's presence, Abraham believed that God can raise the dead and call into being things that don't even exist. Against all odds, when it looked hopeless, Abraham believed the promise and expected God to fulfill it. He took God at his word. He put his eye on exactly what God said. And as a result, he became the father of many nations. Skip to verse 19. In spite of being nearly 100 years old when the promise of having a son was made, his faith was so strong that it could not be undermined by the fact that he and his wife were incapable of conceiving a child. He never stopped believing God's promise, basically saying he never took his focus off of anything other than the dream, the promise, the revelation that had been given to him. For he was made strong in his faith. Faith being a byproduct of what? His focus. And because he was mighty in faith and convinced that God made all the power needed to fulfill his promise, Abraham glorified God. Boom. What does this mean for us? It means I don't want you to muster up the faith today. I don't want you even to try to not fear. I want you to drive your focus to whatever God has already said to be true. That dream, that revelation, that desire he gave you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, today, I want you to put your focus on that. And against all odds, when it looks hopeless, expect God to fulfill it. Take him at his word. In spite of being 100, broke, full of mistakes, tons of failures, have the faith so strong that it can't be undermined. Have a focus that is so strong that it cannot be undermined by circumstances. That would change the game. That my focus is so fixed on the dream that God has given me that I can't be undermined, nor can I accommodate to what's going on around me. Never stop believing, for I will be made strong as I focus, because as I focus, my faith will grow. And as my faith will grow, my focus will continue to sharpen. And as my focus continues to sharpen, my faith only grows. And because of this, I'll be mighty in faith, totally convinced, and have the power needed to fulfill the promise. Boom. Stop executing in willpower. Put your focus where it needs to be. Let your faith arise from there and watch as the power of God moves in and through you in a way that you could never have imagined, which will only sharpen your focus, increase your faith, increase the power, and then we will rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Stop trying to rid the fear and just put your focus on where your focus needs to be. What am I saying? Pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Do that and dream on.